Today, we're talking about something many of our clients are either thinking about or talking about and are right in the middle of: supporting aging parents, whilst also managing their own families, careers, and finances. It's one of those areas where money and emotion really collide. Welcome to the Evalesco Healthy, Wealthy and Happy podcast. Today, we're talking about something many of our clients are either thinking about or talking about and are right in the middle of: supporting aging parents, whilst also managing their own families, careers and finances. It's one of those areas where money and emotion really collide. There can be concern for your parents, uncertainty about costs, and often a quiet fear of getting it wrong. And with all of that, it can feel easier to put things off than to know where to begin. I'm joined today by Melody Edwards, our Senior Financial Advisor here at Evalesco. Melody works closely with families to help move them from overwhelm and uncertainty through to clarity and confidence when navigating aged care decisions. Thanks for joining me, Mel.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
This is something that people often know they should address, but really start to put it off. Why do you think that is?
There's so many factors, and I think, there's the she'll be right attitude, which a lot of us carry through life, and, having to face the realization that, the aging process is happening, those who were once very capable and not so much anymore. It is a really acknowledgement of, mortality, and that, that time is limited. So facing that can be quite confronting for a lot of people, but also especially I think for, dealing with parents. And, they've always been that figure who, through childhood and through growing up, they're the ones who are kind of leading the way, and being the support for you to then have to confront that change and dynamic is something that is very difficult to raise, and I think challenging to navigate.
It's certainly that role reversal, isn't it? And it's really that emotional pull.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We see lots of clients come through worrying about saying the wrong thing or opening up conversations and how to go about that. When's the right time to start those conversations?
The earlier the better is definitely the way to go. And I think it's also less pressure. You can take your time, make sure that everyone's in a very stable emotional position as well. The last thing you want to do is make it very stressful and high intensity, where you might not get some productive conversation or good resolutions out of it. You really want to make it as comfortable as it is, given the topic that you're dealing with.
And I think too, we often chat after these meetings that you have with clients, and it's often very reactive because they don't know how to start the conversation. So it's usually, more often than not, unfortunately, at a point of crisis where aging parents might have hit that point where they do need to go into care, and it might have come on all of a sudden, but it might have been a gradual build. So rather than making the proactive decision, it's just easier to, it'll be right, I'll get to it when I get to it. Whereas that proactiveness really can make a big difference.
Yeah. It definitely opens up the choice, and also allows the person who, might need care in the future to have a voice when they're, still healthy, still completely sort of with it from a, capacity perspective, to be able to know what's important to them before that opportunity to speak is taken away.
I think the practicality of that all sounds good in theory, but there's the practical side of, well, how do I start that conversation? I know I need to, and I'm sure there's lots of people listening that do sit there and go, yep, okay, I need to do this. I need to start this conversation. What's a way they can start it?
That's a great question. And I think it will depend on the individuals and the dynamics of the family as well. Sometimes it helps to really be clear around what your intention is around raising this conversation, and not having it being, sort of taking out the concept of, no, I'm already trying to put you in a home, or after, I'm thinking about my future inheritance, or something that might be, underlying as a, questioning your motivations. So I think it's really good to be clear around, what your intention, what you want, what you think is important to address, and why this conversation is so vital to getting that outcome. And on top of that, again, with the calm and making sure that the language you're using is very supportive, highlighting that their needs are front and center of this conversation. That anyone that might have a hand in the whole process, so siblings or extended family, that they're all, keeping it out and open in communication around those, everyone involved, really helps to make sure that there is no uncertainty or confrontation or questioning of, what you're trying to achieve.
I think that's really key, isn't it? It's that collaboration piece. It's the questioning. It's making sure that it's led with care rather than it being skewed to be, well, you're being told that this is what you're
That's
going
right.
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's also a good framing of, this is doesn't we don't have to make decisions right now. We take it in steps. We really just want to make sure that we're not forced to make decisions on your behalf without understanding where you're coming from. The challenge sometimes is, people don't really talk about finances in their family, which, that leads into it. So rather than starting with the hard conversation, around things that you may not have ever talked about, start those questions with the sort of easier, I really care about, making sure you're okay. What is it that you would like to happen? And then sort of build from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important, and it's really about opening that door to getting clarity from that person that you're dealing with and you're talking with and you're looking to care for, to make sure that the outcomes don't have to be rushed. Definitely. Right. Once families start having these conversations, it's often really complex to understand how the aged care system actually works, because even you who works in it every day, or certainly supports people through it, and us as a business, it can feel really overwhelming. So for people that are then emotionally tied to this and worried about the person that they're putting through this process, can you give us a simple overview? Try to.
Try to, yep. Yes, so I think where we, start from is building that care journey. As what does the person who needs care or needs support, what do they need, and what's the prognosis? Most people want to stay at home, understandably. I think it is great to try and keep them in the environment they're familiar with, that they feel supported in, but just getting that extra level of care to be able to continue to be independent is really important. And so having, the support at home packages, getting some subsidies from the government to help fund that is kind of the first step. So getting an assessment, whether you're going into a permanent care facility or getting support at home, the assessment process is pretty similar. So, getting an ACAT assessment and then determining your care needs from there. And then if you are having to, progress to going into a home, then comes the, there's two sides to that pretty much, which is the care and the lifestyle needs, and that's sort of tied in with location, what type of facilities are available and rooms that are available, how close you are to your support network to be able to help supplement or keep you connected to your family or your community. And then there's the financial side, and so they're kind of hand in hand in a way, but the financial side being, how do I actually afford this? And there's a myriad of payments that are required, and a myriad of assessments that are made. So yeah, navigating that based on your personal, sort of circumstances, and figuring out how to blend those needs and worlds together.
And that's overwhelming in itself, let alone then when you get to the detail of it, right? Yeah. So there's lots of moving parts to that. Where do people tend to get caught out?
I think people tend to have almost like a set or preconceived idea of what they can and can't afford. And it's not always that black and white. And, the default might be, I have to sell my home, which, in some cases might make the most financial sense. But there's also a lot of other factors that might prevent that or at least delay it. So really understanding what your options are, what your priorities are, what other means you have to fund. It's not sort of black and white necessarily. Funding care costs is a huge one, but there are other things that, people like, are important to them, like making sure that they are able to potentially keep the family home for sentimental reasons. They want to pass that asset to their kids, preserve their estate value, try and maximize their Centrelink benefits. So, those competing sort of priorities have to factor into the decision making as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key there is making sure that it's simplified, but there's certainly always structure in that decision making process to factor in all those, I guess, levels of complexity and what comes first.
That's right. Yeah. I think especially when you're dealing with this moment in crisis, which often tends to be the case, we are trying to get this conversation started earlier, but oftentimes it is a trigger event like a fall and a hospital stay and, not being able to go back home, that sort of triggers the need for permanent aged care, where often it's about, I think the priority is usually, okay, find the place that's going to work best and then work out the financials from there. Sometimes, true in any sort of strategy you have in when you're talking about finances, is the more you have, the more opportunity or options you have. So, at the end of the day, the government has built a system, although it is quite complex and potentially confusing. It is there to support people when they need it. So there will always be a placement. It might not always be the ideal placement, but it is something that, if you do need care, you will get it in some way, shape or form. So I think the most important thing I tell families is, okay, let's triage this. What's the next step first? What's the first step? What's the next step after that? Let's really focus and hone our decision making on that before, give us a bit of breathing space to then step back and make a sort of broader, financial decision.
Informed decision too. Yeah, that's really key. I guess that point you mentioned, family there, that obviously plays a big part in this too, is that family dynamics is the next layer on this decision making process and this whole process of the collaboration. You've got siblings, different opinions, different capacities, possibly a spouse, de facto spouse that might be from a different relationship than what the kids were from. So what challenges tend to arise here?
Yeah, very interesting ones. So in an ideal world, obviously everyone is on the same page, has the same goals, priorities, capacity potentially. So it is taking the measure of, okay, who is stepping up, who is actually legally appointed to be able to make these decisions on their behalf. So having an enduring guardian and power of attorney in place is really important. And then also if you have multiple, power of attorneys or multiple enduring guardians, or even just, everyone in the same room, that they're all, again, communicating really openly around what their expectations are, what they're trying to achieve, who's responsible for what. Sometimes logistics matter. Someone might be closer, able to, take the time out to help do all the actual physical, back and forth and meeting with, various, doctors, providers,
everyone. Logistics of getting people around.
Absolutely. That's a huge thing. So it could be someone who literally is the closest person, but that doesn't mean the other parties can't be involved or be part of that whole process. So I think it's being really clear on that. And then where there any sort of disagreements arise, that you are, again, if it's getting heated, which can get, especially under a high stress, environment, that you do take the step back and really then refine the focus. Okay, this is the decision point we need to make. What's the challenges here? Everyone gets a space to speak. Sometimes having a third party, advisor, someone who is aware of all of the issues, not part of it, can help to sort of navigate that in a productive way.
And I think that's really key too. It's that family dynamic. Obviously, you don't want something like this, especially when it's a crisis, to come between a family unit either. So I think, and your point before about one person often being kind of the centre of it, ferrying between appointments or managing the financial side of things, they often carry that responsibility. And whilst it can be shared, it isn't always shared. And that can often lead to stress or resentment. amongst the group as
Yeah.
well. So that's another layer of pressure on top as well, let alone the impacted parent. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think it is really important to have everyone touch base with, each other, and even, if there are struggles from that side of things, that, that resentment doesn't build up and sort of implode.
Yeah, and I think that's really key. I mean, we as financial advisors can help on the finance side, but it actually then leads through and can really, if it's done right, early in consultation with the party involved,
Yeah.
the parent, usually, it can actually preserve relationships as well, which is really important at this time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess for someone at the beginning of this, or thinking that it might be coming in the next 1, 2, 5, 10 years, what are the key things to remember?
So if you're sort of the person potentially going into care or needing more care, really thinking about what's important to you, what ideally you would like to happen, almost stress testing or scenario testing. Okay, so what happens if this happens? If, my health declines in this way, I might be physically healthy, but mentally, that declines, or vice versa. Really make, and I think have that honest conversation with yourself firstly, but then take that to your family who's going to support you, so they know what your preferences and your priorities are. And I think that is a really important first step. If you're sort of trying to broach this with a loved one, a parent or a spouse who may need this care in the near to medium future, again, starting with what is it that they would like, and saying, no decisions have to be made today. This is not about setting up this as this is going to happen tomorrow, but what would you like to happen? How does that look? How can we support you in that journey?
I think, and that's really the key, isn't it? It's leading with that empathy, to make it as easy as possible on everyone. And that's where starting early can take that pressure away.
That's right. Yeah.
It's much easier to have those conversations, or at least revisit them if they don't go quite to plan the first time, is take a step back and go, okay, well, how can we approach it to get the outcome we need? Just to, I guess, seek clarity from the loved one.
Yes.
So you know who to go to next to start those conversations.
Yeah. And I think as well, oftentimes, the person supporting their parent gets thrown in the deep end, both from a care perspective and a financial perspective. So, being able to get that understanding sooner, even if it's very high level, just helps make that transition, that putting on that hat, a little bit easier, a little bit smoother, with less stress. Yeah,
absolutely. And I guess too, it's small decisions now can make a big difference down the line. Big difference down the line when it comes to this. If you're not in crisis point yet, you've made the little decisions to make the big decisions much easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think the key is you don't need all the answers, but starting the conversation is really what matters now. Thanks, Mel. It was great to chat. And it's been such a practical and, I guess, reassuring conversation that families, it can give them a bit of peace of mind that they can start to navigate this, even if it feels like it's a long way away.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If this episode resonated with you, or you're thinking about how this might apply to a loved one or your family, getting guidance can really help. Please reach out or visit our website, and we'd be more than happy to chat further. Thanks.